Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night. Waking or sleeping, thy presence my light.
One of the most piercing questions that really touched my heart through this Bible study was, do I really love Christ? And it took me by surprise. I would think, of course I do. I mean, don't I? But when I really examined the way I put emphasis on my idols instead of spending time with Him, instead of really loving Him, it really put things into perspective for me. And I realized that I need to divert my energies from those things that have become my idols to a loving relationship with Christ.
As we grow spiritually, as the stones in our hearts are removed, our blindness begins to be healed. We actually see people differently. In Mark 8, Jesus heals a blind man. And after Jesus touched the blind man, He asked him, "Do you see anything?" And he said, "I see men, but they look like trees walking." Then Jesus touched him again, and he saw people clearly. What does this mean? That Jesus failed the first time and had to do it again? No, every miracle is also meant to teach us something spiritually. It is also a parable. And this one shows us that spiritual growth is gradual, because we have these idols in our heart that block our vision. How do we see people when idols are blocking our vision? We see them as a means to an end. Galatians 5:15 says, "You bite and devour one another. Watch out, lest you consume one another." Now, we see it all the time in the world, people using each other, but we do it too, if we're honest. I was devouring my administrative assistants. I thought I was finding my identity in Jesus Christ, but I was finding my identity in the success of my ministry. And so I needed to control things and make sure she was doing a good job and make sure everything was going the way I felt it needed to go. And I am having a better relationship, not just with my administrative assistants, but with everybody. That's what's so amazing. I want you to hear from Rachel again, for she tells how seeing her idols changed her relationship with her children.
I have one child with whom I've had conflicts with from very early on. And I'm beginning to realize that I was making an idol of what I wanted my children to be, how I wanted them to act, what I wanted them to become, instead of just accepting them for who God has made them. I read in Age of Opportunity, Paul Tripp talks about when we're serving our idols, we actually began to see our children as enemies. And we actually, because they're keeping us from what we want and our idols, we actually start to get angry at them and fight against them rather than loving them and showing them grace and fighting for them. And they have a battle going on in their own hearts. And we need to be fighting for them. I think I've been thinking, probably not consciously, but just that if I could control people and things and fix things in my life, that then I'd be happier. But I actually found that I was making myself miserable in doing that, and I was making everybody around me miserable in doing that, and that my idols just constantly would fail me, and they would bring harm to me instead of just the joy and the intimacy that I have with the Lord when I run to Him instead of my idols.
One of the things I noticed is that in the mornings when I would come out to get my breakfast, Rachel would be in a fairly intense discussion with one of our children. There'd be a conflict or even an argument going on. But recently, Rachel's really changed. And I've noticed that when I come out for breakfast, the atmosphere is more pleasant. There's a lot more love just visible between her and the children. And I've just seen that real tangible change. It's been great, really.
When the stonecutter whittles away our idols, we see people differently. Not as trees walking, but as real people with hurts and needs. Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones said, "Above all else, avoid making a premature claim that your blindness has been healed." Understanding the depth of our sin can humble us and alert us to our deceitful hearts. Martin Lloyd-Jones also said, and he was not only an esteemed pastor, but a medical doctor, he says, most of our depression comes because we are listening to our souls instead of talking to our souls. Because our souls are like hungry whirlpools that tell us lies. Storms come up here in Door County. They're fascinating to watch. This is a picture of my daughter-in-law, Julie, and my granddaughter, Jessa, watching a storm come up right out here. At first, the water is completely still and the birds stop singing. Then there's just a little ripple in the water and you begin to hear the thunder and the flash lightning. Then the trees begin to blow a little, and then the waves begin to grow, and then the whitecaps come, and they can be so big that they can sweep over our dock. That's what happens when we do not address our idols. They get more and more and more control, because lying begets lying, and bitterness begets bitterness, and gluttony begets gluttony, and anxiety begets anxiety. And then there's a real storm in our souls. When I was devouring my administrative assistants, I was listening to my soul. And my anxious thoughts were multiplying. Oh no, my ministry will fall apart if she does not have this retreat completely in hand. How is she really spending her time today? Maybe I better micromanage her. I didn't put it that way, but maybe I'd better just watch how she's behaving herself today. I should have said, "Be still, my soul. You hired a good woman who loves the Lord, who is talented. Just give her a little free rein and let God guide her." When Rachel was in constant tension with her children, she was listening to her soul. Oh no, we're the pastor's family. My children have to look good, they have to get good grades, they have to good manners, they have to be perfect. Or what will the congregation think? What she should have said is, "Be still, my soul. All that really matters is God's approval. And He promises that if my ways please Him, He'll make even my enemies to be at peace with me." Our soul talk needs to magnify the Lord so that He is big and we and our idols become small. There are also cultural and gender idols. As women, we tend to find our security in people instead of God. When I wrote The Friendships of Women over 25 years ago, I was very aware of how easily we as women find our security in our friendships. And I remember our daughter Sally was just a little girl then, and she and her friend Tricia were practically joined at the hip, and I was beginning to get anxious and watching them, and they were so anxious if they didn't have time together, or what if they didn't get in the same third grade? The life would fall apart. They knew it. And so I said to them, "Do you two think you're dependent on each other?" And Sally said, "What does dependent mean?" And I said, "Well, do you need each other?" And they both said, "Yes!" And Sally said, "Well, is that wrong?" I said, "Well, you know, The one we're supposed to be dependent on is Jesus Christ. He's the only one who will be the solid rock. Sally said, well, can't I be dependent on Jesus and Tricia? And I thought, that's how I feel. I want to be dependent on Jesus and my husband. And if anything ever happened to him, I would not be able to go on. Even then, God was saying, Dee, your only solid rock is me. I'm the only one who will never move away, who will never betray you, and will never die. For my husband did die in his prime of cancer. This week in the book, you'll read Christy's story. And this is a picture of Christy and me up here in the winter. Her story touches a chord with women. When Christy's best friend, Sarah, was graduating from college a year before her and getting married, Christy was heartbroken, listening to herself. How can I ever be happy at college without Sarah there? She should have been saying, be still, my soul. I have you, God, and you will provide the friends I need. Most of our depression comes because we're listening to our souls instead of speaking the truth to our souls. We need to talk to our souls. We need to sing to our souls.
Be still.